Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. As we've said throughout the last couple of weeks together, there's something about knowing your days are numbered that it forces this intentionality to your behavior, right? I mean, the more lighthearted way that we talk about it is, well, we like to talk about it as a bucket list. I mean, what are the things that you want to do, the people you want to spend time with, the stories that you want to tell before your time is up? Moses was the one who wrote those words about numbered days producing a heart of wisdom. But if he's right, and I think he's right, then Jesus' last days, well, they should become pretty interesting to us. I mean, from the minute he stepped into Jerusalem that fateful year, Jesus knew his days were numbered, which means the stories that he chose to tell should tell us something about what's most important. I mean, we've been paying special attention to Jesus' last stories, his bucket list stories, and the question that we've been pondering together is, well, why did he choose to tell these stories to his disciples? What was he trying to communicate? Week 1, we talked about the parable of the bridesmaids, and the most important thing was that his disciples be wise rather than foolish. Wisdom being actually putting Jesus' words into practice. Now, last week was the parable of the talents, or the bags of gold or silver, and the point was that Jesus wasn't asking them to change the world, but simply to do what they could with what they'd been given. Now, both of those bucket list stories, I think, beg an interesting question. What specifically did Jesus think was the most important thing for his followers to focus on? In which direction should they focus their wise, do what you can with what you've been given type energy and focus? Well, the good news is that Jesus had one more story to tell, and it would be his last story. This is what it said. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he's going to sit on his glorious throne. All the nations are going to be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from the other as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. He'll put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" Which I think is an entirely reasonable thing to ask. I mean, Jesus, if you are who you say you are, then why on earth would you have ever been hungry or thirsty? I mean, you're the one who created food and drink. As the psalmist said, you own the flocks on 1,000 hills. You would never be hungry or thirsty. And you've never been a foreigner to us. I mean, when were you a stranger? The Greek word for stranger is the word xenos. It's where we get our word xenophobia, fear of people from other countries. Jesus, you're from our country. You were born in Bethlehem. Do you remember that? You've literally never been a foreigner to us. And in need of clothing or sick, the word for sick here actually refers to somebody who lacks strength, somebody who's weak or vulnerable. And as for the in prison part, I mean, Jesus, prison is for criminals. In fact, you've literally never been any of the things that you're talking about. You're not a criminal, you're not a foreigner, you're not vulnerable, hungry, or... I mean, when have you ever been like that? When have we ever seen you like that? The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these my brothers and sisters, you did for me." In other words, although you may not identify with with any of these people, these are the people that I identify with. These are the people for whom I care deeply. So to care for the hungry, the thirsty, those from other countries, to care for the sick and the vulnerable, those in need of clothing, and even those in prison, to care for them is to care for me. To put it even more starkly, the best way to love me is by loving them. This was a staggering statement for Jesus. I mean, up until this point in history, the way you showed your devotion to God is by your devotion to maintaining your personal piety, your holiness, follow the rules, celebrate the holidays, keep the rituals. That's how you show your love for God. But Jesus is like flipping the script. In my absence, he says, here's how you focus your energy. Here's how you can live the wise life. Here's some direction for what to do in your small corner of the world. Care for the hungry, the thirsty, the immigrant, the poorly clothed, the weak and vulnerable, and even those in prison. Live a life of compassion towards the downtrodden and the destitute. And what if we prioritize our religious rituals over relationships with those in need? Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you didn't look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" He will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life, which is a really harsh warning to those who prioritize the religious ritual over the relationship to those in need. In fact, it's no surprise that the next few verses in Matthew show how those religious, ritualistic people responded. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But for his followers, his true disciples, this final bucket list story left them with a choice. Are you going to be sheep or are you going to be goats? And I think it's incredible, as you're going to soon find out as we read the rest together today. It's gut-wrenching what the disciples chose to do. After Jesus poured into them in his final days, pouring exactly what he wanted from people who were going to follow him, a life defined by compassion for others, especially the downtrodden, the desperate and disadvantaged, those with low or even no status in society. It's amazing that after Jesus outlined in such clear terms for his disciples what he wanted, this was their initial response. Judas sold him out for 30 pieces of silver, caring more about his own financial gain rather than faithfulness to Jesus. Most of the disciples deserted Jesus when the pressure was turned up, caring more about their own safety than the call of their Savior. And then when pressed, Peter of all people, he's not going to just deny Jesus, but he's going to curse up and down and swear that he doesn't care whether Jesus lives or dies. On this particular Good Friday, 2021, I think the choice gets laid before us again. What kind of follower are you going to be? And I wonder if it's not possible that we could identify with the response of the disciples. Now, I'm not going to accuse you, but I'll tell you, for me, it's been a hard year. A year in which a lot of people have suffered, and I've wondered, have I lived up to my mandate from Christ? To feed the hungry, quench the thirsty, to clothe the needy, to prioritize the weak and the vulnerable? Have I showed hospitality to the foreigner, the immigrant? Did I find ways to encourage those in prison? Or did I prioritize my religious rituals? Did you spend this last year identifying with and caring for those Jesus clearly identified with? Or did you prioritize your own rights, your own religious rituals? Did we forego our faithfulness to Jesus and his mission for the sake of 30 pieces of silver, caring more about our finances? Did we desert Jesus' call on our lives when the pressure got turned up? Did we flat out act like we didn't even know it, denying he meant anything to us by the way that we treated others? You know, there's this old hymn that we sing every year on this day. But for some reason, this year I'm hearing it differently. The hymn asks the question, were you there, over and over and over again? It's an interesting song because I think it hits differently depending on who you are in the story. I mean, I wonder how Judas or Peter or the deserting disciples would have heard it. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? No, I traded him for 30 pieces of silver. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? No, I denied I even knew him. And when the pressure turned up, I fled and deserted him. Oh, oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble. If any of that hits home for you, then I'd want to invite you to pay close attention to the story of the Easter weekend, because it's a beautiful thing. Not everybody abandons Jesus in the story. In fact, there's a group of women who had been part of the discipleship group the whole way through and who had actually largely been bankrolling Jesus' mission. And when the chips were down and so many other people fled, they were there. They watched. They saw Jesus take the weight of all of humanity's sin on his shoulders. They were there, and they listened and heard as Jesus prayed that God would forgive those responsible for putting him there, for leaving him there, for abandoning him there. They would hear him pray for the forgiveness of the soldiers, the mockers, the denying, deserting disciples. For me, for you, for them. Friends, every time you come back to this last and greatest end to the bucket list stories of Jesus, you get to choose which kind of follower will you be. Every time you open the Gospels, every time you wake up on a Friday morning, every Good Friday that we remember these stories together, you have the benefit of hindsight. You get to choose again, wise or foolish, faithful or unfaithful, sheep or goat, there or not there. Knowing that Jesus has forgiven your sin, paying the price with his life, you get to choose again. So choose to be wise, putting his words into practice. Choose to be faithful, doing what you can with what you've been given. Choose to be like the sheep. Prioritize the downtrodden, the weak and the vulnerable, the immigrant and the prisoner in your small corner of the world. Choose to demonstrate your love for Jesus by devoting it to the service of others. If you think about it, it's exactly what he did for you. When Jesus had finished saying all of these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch for me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Couldn't you men keep watch for me for 1 hour? He asked Peter. Watch and pray so that you won't fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away a second time and prayed, My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done. When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer.
Sorrow's Lamb of God, by his own betrayed, the sin of man and wrath of God has been on Jesus laid. Silent as he stood accused, beaten, mocked, and scorned, bowing to the Father's will, he took a crown of thorns. And oh, that rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me. And now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Of heaven, God's own Son, to purchase and redeem, and reconcile the very ones he nailed into that tree. And oh, that rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me. And now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. And now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. Now the curse of sin has no hold on me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. And now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. Now the curse of sin has no hold on me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. Know that rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me. And now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor up to thee.
While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal for them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you have come for, friend." Then the men stepped forward and seized Jesus and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him, "for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I can't call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?" In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You also were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus." He denied it again, with an oath, "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you're one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the words that Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make a wretch His treasure. How great the pain of searing loss! The Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon the cross, my sin upon His shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held Him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought What should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: his wounds have paid my ransom. Yes, this I know with all my heart: his wounds have paid my ransom.
As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him: "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. Many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs.
the truth.